Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be, and whether you're watching live or archived. And welcome to another Inautel's Transmission Talk Tuesday webinar series. For those who are paying attention at home, I did glance to the left to make sure that I said it right. This is episode number 49. Big party next week when we hit episode 50. Still not 100% sure what we're going to do, but it's going to be fun. I know, I'm pretty sure there'll be some tips, tricks, and we'll probably talk about ferrites and stuff like that. Speaking of that kind of stuff, gizmos, gadgets, and things like that, we are talking about the stuff we do to make the job easier or more reliable or sometimes just more fun. To do that, I picked a guy who wears more hats than I do by a long shot. We're talking with Tom Lawler. Tom, welcome and thanks for being here today.
Very welcome, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
So you, in addition, of course, on the title slide here, it says contract or customer support engineer for RCS, but you also do a lot of engineering. You're a DJ. You wear many hats, like I said.
I do. I have some RF and studio clients here in Western PA and Eastern Ohio, as well as I do voiceover work and remote voice tracking for a couple stations on the East Coast from my home base here in the North Hills of Pittsburgh.
So basically, what you're saying is sleep is optional.
It's a good thing that everyone or most people at RCS now are working remotely, because if I had to do the commute, I don't think I'd be able to have time to blink, let alone do anything else.
And that's the cool thing about the working from home. I told somebody they're like, how do you find the time to go out and walk on the trails with the dogs you like you do? And it's like, well, I'm not driving an hour and a half a day every day anymore. So that makes a difference.
It
Now,
really
you
does.
and over and above that, you're fairly, I say fairly recently because the older I get, the closer these things happen. You know, time flies. But you're married in the past couple of years too.
Yes, in fact, my wife and I are approaching our year anniversary in a week and a half, which reminds me I really should probably buy her something.
Congratulations, and yeah, welcome to doing it the way the rest of us do. So the advantage we've got, my wife and I were sitting down this summer at some point, and I opened up Facebook and scrolled over and clicked on memories, and I'm scrolling down, and I look over and I go, oh, honey, happy anniversary. So that's how we all roll now. Mark Voris mentions that yeah, you'd have a long drive to Ogallala for commuting to RCS, but I think these days the cool thing is that all this stuff is done pretty much remotely, and even before COVID.
Um, Even before COVID, I'm part of the support staff at RCS. The FTS team is, or Field Technical Services. So my full-time job with RCS is I install Zeta, G Selector, Next Gen, our suite of products on client machines, do automation conversions, music scheduler database conversions. And with COVID, we still had to get these done. I did a conversion from Master Control and Selector 15 to GS and Zeta in Puerto Rico from my office here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Did
And
the date conversion training, everything from here with, just having all the tools at hand with ConnectWise and Zoom. It makes life a lot easier.
yeah, and that's one of the things. I mean, we're a Teams facility, so we can send out Teams invites to Teams users or non-users as far as that goes. And then the support guys use Team Viewer Pilot. And basically, the customer gets the link, they click on it on their phone, and it allows us to use their phone camera as our eyes. And we just tell them where to point it. And the cool thing is that the customer is seeing the same thing on his phone. He's seeing the camera view, but our guy can annotate it and draw little sketches and stuff and or arrows and say, hey, look at this type thing. So yeah, it's again one of those cool tools, and that kind of leads us into today's topic. Now, before we get too geared up on this, for anybody in the audience, I see 75 on at the moment. Thanks for joining us. But if you're new to one of these things, we try to make these incredibly interactive. As you heard, Mark Boris had already found the little question box and mentioned the commute. Uh, Definitely type in your questions, criticisms, comments, concerns, sarcasm, snark. We take it all. Uh, I'll usually read them out. If it gets a little on the edge, I might reserve the right to use some editorial comment with it, but editorial license rather. But we have a lot of fun with that. If you're not shy and you've got a microphone, it won't be as cool as Tom's microphone. I told him I had microphone envy. But if you do have a mic and you're not shy, click the little hand wavy icon. We'll unmute you and make you part of the conversation. Because, oops, you're going to see the picture that noise came from in a couple of seconds. But we're talking about gizmos and gadgets and the things, because we all use different stuff to make the job easier. Oh, one other thing, forgot to mention it. Wayne, if you're on, I apologize, but if you're an SBE member, Nautel webinar does qualify for half of a recertification credit under category I of the recertification schedule. Certainly whatever notepad, spreadsheet, whatever you use to keep track of all this stuff, tally marks on the wall, write it down and remember to pay attention to it. Richard Sondermeyer says that he's enjoying it today from 35,000 feet. So high on the Wi-Fi there, Richard. And I hope the stream holds up for you. But definitely, if you're an SBE member, remember to write this down. If you're not an SBE member, well, why not? There are some pretty good benefits to the program. So Tom, are you an SBE member? I'll put you on
I
the spot.
was, I was when I was a student. My membership has lapsed, but I need to re-enroll and get back in the club because there are a lot of great benefits. I was a member of SBE 15 in New York, and of course, Tom Ray being the same member meant there was a great brain to pick.
Yep, yep. And that, I think some of the networking just amongst the guys there, and that's why we do these, is because it's like I told somebody every week I get to go out and find somebody smarter than me to talk about stuff with. And this week you're that guy. So
I, oh boy.
hey, I set the bar low, trust me. So we're going to talk about hardware, software, a little bit of everything. We just, like I said, shoot the ideas for whatever you can think of and throw them into the chat here. Open your mic. I know there's a lot of folks out there with a lot of creative ideas. And of course, I beat the drum on safety. So I got on Amazon this morning and found one of these little proximity voltage detectors. I mean, I've got one. It's probably in my laptop case. I don't see it to my left here in the pile of stuff, but BGS was giving them out at one point, not to give a plug, but you can get them, these ones. Well, like I say, $15 on Amazon, and I've got 3 or 4 of them around. Tom, what do you use safety wise? What comes to mind? Going to put you on the spot because we didn't discuss this in the show prep at all.
Safety wise, I always keep a fiberglass stick in my truck. It was one that I got years ago at a job site, and I always keep it in my truck, always to turn breakers on and off because I just never know if there's something faulty, especially if it's a new site that I haven't been around. I say other safety things I always keep. I always make sure to have a first aid kit in my truck. My wife being a nurse made sure that it was fully stocked with all sorts of creams and salves and band-aids and tourniquets because we work in a lot of remote locations and you never know what's going to happen. I was working at an AM site in Ohio. I walk in and there is a lovely snake nesting right on top of the broadcast tools remote control.
Mm-hmm.
So you just never know.
Right.
But I really should pick up one of those. See, I learned something just now. So you're teaching everybody.
It's kind of the goal. Now, William Harrison's got a link up in the chat or in the questions for the fluke meter. I'm betting it's okay. It's the fluke T6-600. So our disembodied voice, Ed's off today. He's got an appointment. Matt's filling in, and Matt, I'm going to ask if you can copy that and paste it into the chat. If you can't, then just let me know and I'll take care of it. But definitely there's all kinds, and this one I just searched for non-contact voltage detector, and that was the most inexpensive one that came up. And I mean, Same rule applies as with the good ones. These are battery powered devices. Some of them are better than others at letting you know if the battery's low, but by all means, you should test it on a known hot circuit first before you assume that it's not. Oh, so the Williams says that the one he's got the link for, and I see that Matt's got it up in the chat now, it tells you what the voltage is. So there you go. That's definitely beneficial. All right. So those are the kind of things we're looking for. So thanks. I appreciate that, William. That's great information. For me, one of the drums I beat, and I was thinking back to your fiberglass stick, that's a really good idea because that's something you got to roll a duct tape and a set of jumper cables. And who in the East Coast especially doesn't have jumper cables in their car? Um, but you could rig up a grounding wand in a heartbeat
Mm-hmm.
if you needed to, So if you're working on a tube rig and needed to ground and the shortened stick is gone, missing, or otherwise awry, then yeah, you can come up with an alternative. So that's also a good idea. Mark Voris mentions he has a couple of wood dowels for test leads, and yeah, same deal. So you can get your hands a little further away from the stuff. I like the test leads with the jaws, the clip jaws on them, so I can clip them onto the thing while it's powered down, and then run the leads out to the meter, and lean the cabinet panel back in place and step away when I take the measurement. Just yeah, nobody likes to have their hands close to the big bolts. Okay. The other thing I'm a big fan of is Lockout Tag Out. And this is a search I did this morning on Home Depot. So anybody says that lockout stuff's too expensive, there you go, 50 bucks. You know, and again, I think one of the guys who got me on to this really hard was Mike McCarthy out of Chicago. And Mike's gone now, but that legacy lives on. He really beat that drum, and he used lockout tagout religiously, even if he was the only one on site. And that was where I got. And anybody's heard me talk about safety has heard this story before, but yeah, if you're working alone, it will force you to slow down a little. Just the act of having to find the key and take the lock off and untag the breaker, well, that's the time you can use to think, did I take the grounding wand off that final? Or did I close or put the interlocks all back or the panels all on? The sort of things that can really lead to some unpleasant surprises. So now, again, Tom, putting you on the spot. Do you use lockout, or are we going to add this to the list, to the grocery list?
We are going to add this to the grocery list because, again, the sites that I in general take care of, I'm the only one there. And I just never, again, it did not cross my mind. But I mean, again, repair in haste, repent in leisure. So this
Yeah,
would be a good slow down reminder for me to, check
right.
myself and make sure everything's going okay. So yes, it's again, I'm learning more things today.
And it's one of those. Dave Holtzman from Continental, rest his soul, and there was conversation came up with him on or about him on Facebook today. But he was the one that used to say, as I recall, nobody ever died from a lack of rock and roll. So sometimes taking that extra breath can make a big difference. And yeah, it's just good to slow down sometimes. The other thing I like a lot, and I've mentioned this ad infinitum, ad nauseum, everybody's heard me say it, is the thermal imager. And of course, I'm unzipping mine because my thermal imager people, but it's right beside me here, of course, because I can. And it's just a fast and easy way to check breakers. You can check cable, like hardline stuff like that. And those are coming way down in price. This particular one, again, Amazon, 150 bucks. Uh, you know, uh, there was a question in the advanced questions. Gordon from right here locally uh, is asked what amateur radio test gear might be used for testing that's a little more economical. And we'll talk about that a bit too. But Tom, you had a bunch of software type stuff that you linked or sent me a list of. And so I want to get you to talk to like Portpeaker, for example.
So Portpeaker is very useful for me because a lot of the stations I deal with, they want to be able to do RDS, and the encoder is at the transmitter site, and it's usually in a flavor of Innovonics, and we have IP links everywhere because the 950 STLs, especially in my neck of the woods, for some of the clients I deal with, have gone the way of the dodo. And there are some times where I just want to make sure that the syntax is right, that the packets contain everything they need. And I was turned on to this program by a friend of mine who works at Wheatstone, and it comes in very handy for making sure that the data that's being sent is the proper data, and it's going to the port it should go to, it's going to the IP it should go to, and making sure that I have everything programmed perfectly in the automation software or in the helper program for some other automation software, that those UDP or TCP packets contain exactly what they need to, and the data is not being mishandled or modified. And it's just one of those little things where, oh, okay, now I see where I have to modify this to make it work. Or, hey, what's that weird character doing there? Why is that there?
Right. And this is really cool because for us, for example, the transmitters all have RDS generation built in, or you can run the ASCII text, the PS and the RT, the radio text fields via IP or serial connection. And that's all great, but when we know the automation system sending it and we know the transmitter's configured to receive it, then something like this is huge to let you know that, hey, yeah, what do the satellite guys say? Looks good leaving here. But you can check it at both the studio end and the transmitter site end and see if maybe you've got an issue with port forwarding or it's not breaking through. Maybe there's a VPN blocking it. So no, my turn to learn something today. That was really cool. So see, this is, like I said, why I get the people smarter than me, because I can go in and look up this stuff at my leisure later. Boss, don't expect me to be doing anything productive today. I'll be web surfing. But that's one example. One of the other ones you had mentioned was this port scanner.
So again, with STLs being IP based, and a lot of my clients use either Barracks or Tieline or you pick another flavor, the Comrex, Bricklinks, and they'll throw them on the network. And again, I'm trying to do a lot of this remotely. One of my clients has a network of stations around Pennsylvania, and he'll just throw the Barracks on the network, and the Barracks devices that he uses doesn't have the readout that shows you the IP address. Well, I got to find it, configure it. He'll have this on his computer. It'll scan an IP range. It'll come back with the name of the device, the MAC address, the IP address, what ports are open, so you can see if it's running Telnet or HTTP or has you can see what the devices do. You can find that rogue printer on your network really easily with this port scanner. It comes in very handy, especially if the device is set to DHCP and you're not sure, okay, where did it go on the network? I don't have the login for the router, but I still have to scan the network to find out where these devices have gone.
And the cool thing about this, it's like I use Shodan a lot for IoT. It's an IoT search engine. And of course, it looks at the whole internet. So if I type in a keyword like Nautel or Barracks, it'll tell me every device that's open and visible. But being able to identify an IP range like that means that you can isolate it down to your specific subnet. And that is really cool. So yeah, another good. And I noticed that there was a lot of emphasis on freeware here. So that's also the price is
Well,
right.
well, again, we're in radio, so we have to think about, okay, is the client going to want to pay for this? And also, it's I mean, I edit audio and video on freeware software, and we've come a long way from the days of needing to have an Avid rig or a Pro Tools machine to do editing for that side of the business. And it's great that we have all these freeware and shareware programs that can help us, and we don't have to shell a lot of bucks for software to do that in these days.
Yeah. Now, of course, the usual caveats apply. You do want to pick something trusted because there is
Yes,
some scary stuff out there too. Now,
there is.
John Van Milligan mentions RDL SDR for a cheap spectrum analyzer for quick checks that can give you RDS readout as well. And we'll talk
Believe
about
it
a
or
few of
not,
those.
I was going to say, believe it or not, I actually have one of those here in my studio that I use.
So
I
there
have
you
that. I have
see.
that exact SDR.
Thanks for not putting that one on the list of tools and toys. See, this is why we rely. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Well, it's buried behind my rack, and I have it. I bought it back in January. I played with it. Oh, cool! I can see RDS, but I left it back there because it's hooked up to my antenna system here in the house. So I don't. It's not one of the things I take with me, unfortunately.
Yeah. And it doesn't immediately come to mind either, because again, out of sight, out of mind. I got through doing this and I'm looking around and I wandered into my toolbox in my workshop and said, other than the obvious, we all use screwdrivers and side cutters and needle nose and stuff like that. And so, hand tools, yeah, okay, everybody needs them. Ideally, if you got wrenches, they're going to be metric or English or both. Somebody posted a picture of a crescent wrench and said, look, it's metric and imperial. And I said, cool, but is it left-handed also? Um, how Mark Voris mentions that Pura.cz also has RDS scanner software as well as Silent Sense. And that's another thing too, because there is a lot or are a lot of lower cost hardware solutions out there from what we had, 10, 25 years ago, even in some cases.
I actually set up the Pura.cz silence sensor a couple weeks ago for a client of mine in Ohio. And the only caveat is if you're going to use it with a Gmail account, you have to make sure to enable less secure connections in Gmail, or else Gmail blocks the software from sending out emails. But it works great if you have a way to loop back your console audio into a computer in the studio like we did. It works great. It's a great silence sensor, and the price is right too.
Yeah. William makes a comment about gluten-free crescent wrenches, but he didn't ask if they were non-GMO. Um, let's see, silent sensor on an unused input on a Nautel Importer Plus works a treat. Yep. So there are a couple of different things that you can use these things for, and some of them are not necessarily what they were originally geared for. And that was one of the advanced questions. Curtis had asked, what tools do you have that you use for a purpose other than what it was originally intended for, and it works better than other tool? Does anything come to mind like that? Like things you use that not necessarily for what they were originally meant for? I mean, the fiberglass rod notwithstanding.
Uh, I'm racking my brain. I'm trying to think. The only thing I can think of is I've used a lot of trees to reshape bumpers that I've dinged up, but I'm not sure that counts.
Well, now having said that, I have also, so in my spare time, I help out. And I mean, Jamie, our full-time guy, does most of the heavy lifting, but I help out with some of the engineering tasks at a local community station. And for the first 2 or 3 years of our existence, we were an event only, which is a Canadian thing. You can get a 3-month event license. And so we were on the air for the summer for a couple of years. But the Shively antenna was very literally tie wrapped to a tree. So talking to using trees, we were using trees for towers. And it worked great, except for the beam tilt you got on a windy day. But let's see. Oh, vice grips for grounding clamps. Yeah, we've all seen that more than once. And I
That was a
told you,
hood. I've used those for hood releases too.
yup, yeah. And that's something else you do in your spare time. You've got a Cadillac collection. We kind of talked about in the early days. Igor, is it? Is that the one I remember from
Yes.
Facebook?
Yep, Igor is our double black '88 Cadillac Brougham, black vinyl top, black paint, and grained leather interior. And I also, in addition to my engineering, I also will work on Igor as well, and that's the one hobby. And there's not much
Mhm.
time for anything else, but yeah, working on cars and engineering seems to go hand in hand some days. Just, I mean, Tom Ray is great at that.
Yeah, and that, well, yeah, with the car doctor stuff, and but that's one of the things too that we were talking about before. That was kind of an apple didn't fall far from the tree thing, right? I mean, your dad was both the DJ and technical too.
He was. My dad was a mechanic in his earlier years, and then he transitioned into radio. And he always had a technical mind, but he never focused that in radio. And that's why he told me, look, you'll always have a job if you're the engineer or IT person, because they can automate you, satellite you, voice track you, but they still need someone to make sure that it goes over the air.
Yeah. And that was one of the things I learned early on. It's like, no matter whether we're broadcasting the hits, the traffic on the nines, or 8 channels of digital data with no audio whatsoever, somebody's got to fix the stuff. And so that's really cool. Now, Tim Berry mentions we get on the topic of cars, and for him, it's a 65 Mustang. And, that's not unimpressive at all. Back on topic, Mark Forrest mentions Pura CZ also has an analyzer at a reasonable price if you need to check frequency deviation, RDS, and signal strength. And he has one of those that he carries with him at all times. So, folks, getting a couple of hits for Pura.cz. So certainly, they're based out of Czechoslovakia, I think it's the CZ, right, Tom?
Yep. Yes, sir.
And they do have a reputation for building some pretty good stuff. So there you go. Shout out for them. Um, One of the things on the topic of using ham type stuff used to be that a vector network analyzer was a multiple thousands of dollars worth of test gear. And some of the hand stuff will work and do a job really well. And this one, the Nano Vna, and this is off of the RTL SDR site, but you're down into the $50 range now. Now, I'm going to quantify that. It's definitely a buyer beware, caveat emptor type situation, insofar as some of this stuff does not play well in big RF fields. Remember, it is geared for the lower watt ranges, and so you do want to pay attention to that. If you're going to hook it on to I don't think this one goes down into the AM band, but definitely if you're going to hook it on to an FM and there's a channel combined situation, you do want to be careful about that. Eric has asked if all these links could be assembled into an email for circulation afterward. And I tell you what, Eric, I'll take it a step further. So we're not limiting it to the people attending or the people who signed up. We'll make this a part of the next Waves newsletter. And I know I talked about it a bunch, but we're going to postpone it for a bit because we've got something else we're working on. I'm not getting into that, but in the next little while, it will be out. And on the tips and tricks article, I'll put down those links. So links. Now I've got to write it down. So if you see my lips moving, that's why. Because if I don't write it down, of course, I will forget it in about 5 seconds. All right. Now, Tom, getting back to the software you were talking about, another one you had mentioned was the Green Shot.
So this is one that I use every day for my work at RCS, because we work on a lot of client machines, and it's very easy to use this software. Just take screenshots of different programs and software. It has a built-in editor, so you can add arrows and buttons and circles, and it is great for documenting step by step how to do something on a computer. It's freeware, so the price is right, and it's something we use heavily at RCS in our training and in our documentation and support for our customers. That way, they know exactly what's going on in our heads when we say click this button and then select this radial or this checkbox, then hit OK, and it's right here on the screen, on your screen. And it's, again, been a lifesaver for me for having to document what we do for our clients.
Yeah, and this is one of those, these are the kind of tools that as we've gotten more and more into enforced remote work, these are the kind of things, like you say, that can just, and that comes back to the Team Viewer pilot that we were talking about that our support folks use. Just having the ability to use the customer's camera as your eyes, and then be able to annotate what he sees on the display of his phone is huge. So yeah, that's a really good toy. Mark mentions that talking about the Pura where to go, the Pura Analyzer, that they don't have the resolution bandwidth if you're trying to tune a filter, but good for antenna tuning. So again, like I say, do pay attention to the specs. Ray Lewis mentions that the RTL SDR that we were talking about before, that they're working on a Nano Vna version 3 with greater than 100 dB dynamic range and more than 6 gigahertz. So, and that's, yeah, and the funny thing is, Mark put Nano Vna in at the exact same time. So, yep, it's it's one of those things that a lot of these tools, with the evolution of software-defined radios, a lot of these tools have really come down quite a bit.
Oh no, I love it. I on occasion will fire up the SDR, and there's a program that is freeware compiled called NRSC5-GUI, which will work with the RTL SDRs. And it's been great for me here to check out, what FM station is running, what bit rate they're running with IBOC, the traffic and weather maps, the album art. It's really cool what you can do with a $35 USB dongle.
Oh, it's nuts. And I mean, it's one of those, again, 10 years ago, that was just barely a thought. And 20 years ago, there wasn't even a consideration that you could do stuff like this. Let's
Oh
see. And
no,
I said,
it's great times we live in.
it is. And I said 20 years ago, what, you were like a teenager then, so you weren't even thinking about it. But
I was
no,
actually I was running before I figured out Shoutcast. I had a Windows Media Server running on my computer at home in middle school with Winamp being the automation system, playing out oldies and jingles that I collected. So it's been a very long evolution, and I'm glad to see it come this far.
I told somebody once that my first exposure to an actual computer would have been a Tandy Model 1 Level 1, going back probably about 45 years now, maybe a little less, but 40 years or so. And, 4K of RAM, cassette tape drive, acoustic coupler. Mom, I'm on the computer. Uh, so yeah, it's definitely to see that evolution, and I mean, it's funny because my 12-year-old is like, he can't consider a time before Netflix, let alone actually having to make sure nobody else picked up the phone while you were trying to download a picture onto the tractor feed dot matrix printer. Wah, wah, wah. So this is another one that you use quite a bit, the bulk renaming.
Yes. So aside from what I do for RCS in my personal life, I use this for both RCS and personal life, where you can go through and give certain parameters and you can bulk rename files in Windows. And it's come in very handy when I'm doing conversions, because there are some times where if we're doing a OMT conversion and the file extension is MT4, well, it's basically an MP2 in a different wrapper. Okay, so I'll use this to bulk rename it so that it'll go into the automation, it'll go into our Zeta media importer, and Zeta is happy because it sees that .wave extension and it goes, okay, it's a WAV file. I know what to do with that.
Yeah.
Or bulk renaming, because if you I archive all of my DVDs onto my computer because backups are, hard drive space is cheap these days, are relatively cheap, and
Mhm.
you never know what's going to happen with the fragility of physical media. I mean, I have CDs that I had bought 20 years ago and they're starting to rot.
Yeah.
And this utility is great because I'll give it a name and it'll actually sequentially number the episodes of my Perry Mason. Speaking of aging myself, and it's great. It's great for that. It's great for extensions. It's great for numbering. It's great for basically trimming or reformatting, so that, okay, if you have a bunch of files that are artist dash title, but you want to put that space dash space in, it'll do that. It's just one of those great Swiss Army knife utilities for files that when you don't know until you go, oh, I wish I could do that. Well, this usually can if you can program a rule in.
Right. So this basically, just to make sure I got this straight, because again, this is not something that I tend to mess with a lot. Not a lot of RF in the audio world. Well, low frequency, but So if I wanted to use this to configure metadata for feeding artist and song titles, so it was correct, so it was in the format that my automation system wanted, this would be a way to do that.
Yes. So again, it'll detect your do find and replace, so that if it's artist dash title, but it needs to have the spaces in there, this will bulk put all those spaces in. If you used a program to rip CDs that didn't do the naming convention that your automation system wants to see.
Cool. So there you go, folks. And that this one is also freeware.
It is free.
Wow. All
If it's
right.
free, it's for me.
Yeah, yeah, you have been in radio a while. All right. Let's see. I got a question come in there. Well, so Duncan says feel free to bring it up at a more relevant time, but it's a nice big question, and it seems like a good time to ask it because it is sort of a tool type question. We have a DB box audio rester test tone generator cable tester. Oh, so basically a multi-function audio tester. Is there, and this is a good question, and I was going to bring this up, is there anything that does a similar job in a single package? And he's got a link to the original, and so we won't bother with that right now. But the reason that this came up is I read a thread day before yesterday, sometime over the weekend on one of the Facebook engineering lists. Somebody was looking for a replacement for a Ward Beck Bit Buddy because of course Ward Beck's gone. And yeah, so I'm going to throw it out to you and to everybody in the audience. What is your favorite audio test tool, in the sub $500 range? Because I mean, of course, we can go thousands of bucks into audio precision and have fun there. But what do you use for audio testing?
I have a couple different things. I have a very old iPod Nano with files on it at different dB levels and frequencies that I will use to test with a matchbox for audio levels. And
Mhm.
I never could afford the Ward Beck or the Bit Buddy. I have in my rack here, I have a $35 I picked off Facebook Behringer Ultra Match, which will go
Mhm.
from D to A and A to D. And I use that for testing out digital audio sources as well as checking levels. And I mean, it's not very portable, but it got the job done. Unfortunately, with a lot of things that Behringer makes, they made it, we love it, and then they went, oh, okay, well, we'll just get rid of it. But
Yeah.
that's what I use for testing. If you can find one on eBay or Facebook Marketplace, grab one up, because again, they're a great Swiss Army knife if you have to do a lot of D to A conversions and do testing to make sure that it's in the right format, bit depth, all that jazz.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, the Bit Buddy was, of course, that's what we use at the office. There's a couple of other AES testers out there, but just something that gives you a good level measurement. Tell you what, Matt, William has thrown the link in there as well. So how about you throw that in chat, and folks can certainly copy it. And if you want to either shoot me out your alternative to that particular product, or send me an email later, and we'll include that in the Gizmo links that we're going to be working on. Looks like I got my homework from this session too. So and that's always the fun part. So bulk rename, what was the next one I had here? I've got, as I start reading things, I move things around on the screen, and I need about one more display because I'm not up to the Alex Hartman level of wall of monitors yet. But
Uh,
Notepad++ is another one you mentioned too. And so you'll notice for a lot of these, and so I'm going to flick back, and I was all proud of myself. I was going through and it's like, you know what? I'm just going to hide all my own bookmarks because nobody needs to see those. Well, I forgot on this one. So there you go. You can see what Jeff interests himself with when he's not doing Nautel stuff. And I think a lot
Recipes and SNMP stuff, they just go together.
of Well, you know what? If you're working on making something that's going to take a little time in the oven, you can always play with PRTG. And that is, for what it's worth, my go-to. You talked some network monitor earlier, and I'm a big fan of the Passler system. It's got a learning curve, don't get me wrong, But the cool thing about Passler is that you can do all the SNMP monitoring with it, and you can configure it. It's a free download with a 30-day full featured, and then if you don't want to go paid, it goes to the limited free version, which is like 100 channels and a few features cut out. So definitely, it's not free, but it's a useful toy as well. Let's see. Alan mentions that the tech support guys with one of the other companies, well, actually at the Telos Alliance, use Notepad++ as well. So tell me about this.
So many years ago, when I worked at a cluster that used Audio Vault, the engineer there introduced me to Notepad++, and it is great for viewing XML files or large text files, or what we use it for Audio Vault, INI files. It will color code everything. It lays it out very nicely. And it's really great for viewing text-based config files or just any text-based file on it. That way it looks a lot and formats it a lot better than just throwing it open in Notepad and it being in black and white and all the text runs together. It's great if you have to dive into those config files and really parse that data to try and figure out, okay, what's going on with this config file? What's in this XML? What's in this large log file that I have to go through and figure out what went wrong where. And it's just very handy for that. It's a bit like bulk rename utility in that it also is great for editing files as well. It's also really cool because you can, for those of you who've used Scott32 files, if you have a whole bunch of Scott32 files and you don't know, you can't pull the metadata from them, you can open up a Scott wave in Notepad++ and it'll show up very easily the title, artist, and the other metadata, which you can then yank out of it.
Cool. So that's one of those things. And I mean, I'm going to date myself, but do you remember a zillion years ago when you used to be able to edit the source code for your sexy new website on Netscape? And what was the Windows 3 version HTML editor? I've lost the name, but yeah, I mean, some of that stuff.
Microsoft Front Page.
Thank you. Well, no, this is the predecessor to that, but Front Page is also its own particular brand of hell. So you'd create your site in Front Page, and then you'd open it up in Notepad or Windows or Word or WordPerfect or whatever, and strip out all the extraneous stuff because it was a highly bloated thing. Anyway, I had a shout out request from Sean Mattingly to Noah, his engineering intern from University of Indianapolis. So Noah, hey, welcome. Thanks for being here. Hope there's something useful here, and we'll have a little more fun. Cable tester. Okay, Jerry Higgins mentions the DBX CT3 advanced cable tester. So it splits into two parts which is good for testing installed cables. And that's a good point because a lot of cable testers, you get the one box and of course you plug each end in, and that's great unless each end is in different racks or different rooms in some cases. And that's one of the other things as we go more to Cat5, Cat6, RJ45 connected stuff. That is a tool that is not really an option anymore. And whether you're a crimp your own with Easy Crimp or whatever have you, I've got mixed feelings on Easy Crimp because I'm the Luddite. I learned to crimp Cat5 connectors, the old, white, green, green, white, white, and yeah. So that's how I learned to do it. And then you get them all right. And you measure out the length of a thumbnail and you cut them off flat and jam them in and crimp them down and hope you didn't break the cheap plastic crimper because you lost the metal one when somebody stole it at the last job site. How am I doing? Are we covering all the details here?
I think you're bringing back PTSD for me when I had to wire up Glenn Beck's TOC in New York many years ago with all the just crimp and crimp and crimp and crimp and crimp and hope that I didn't cross a wire somewhere.
So we'll definitely, I'll hunt up a link for it, but DBX CT3 Advanced Cable Tester. Maybe Matt can search it in the background and throw that in the chat. And like I say, it'll go into my Gizmos link. I'm going to spend probably 2 hours reviewing the archive for this later and just scrolling stuff down and taking screenshots.
Say that
Um,
name again. Could you say that?
deep.
Repeat the name.
So we like it when Matt opens his mic just for the accent. But so that is a DBX CT3 Charlie Tango 3 Advanced Cable Tester. You got it?
Got it.
All right, moving on. Let's see. What was the name of the Behringer digital audio converter again? Brian asked that.
It is the Ultra Match Pro, as I look at it in my rack.
There you go. So the Ultra Match Pro, Brian. Let's see. Duncan mentions using, going through log files for the automation system, color coding lines of keywords. Again, talking about Notepad++. And William has put the link for the DBX Pro in the chat there, Matt, if you want to go with that. And there is the longest link I have ever seen for anything. I will have to copy and paste that one. Oh, that's again the CT3 at Sweetwater. So 155 bucks. Fluke has a cable tester with a TDR in it, Chris Hayes mentions, which is a little pricey, but it being able to fault find is also a beneficial thing. So that's also cool. And William's got a link to the UltraMatch Pro on the Behringer website. So yeah, there's going to be a pile of links coming at y'all at some point down the road. Now, we were talking about SDRs, and of course, last session we did, don't remember if it was last week or the week before. I've been on the road, so it wasn't last week. But we were talking about SDRs, and I mentioned this ELAD unit, and it's a little higher up. It's 300 odd bucks, but it's a full featured, and it's for confidence monitoring. This is another one of those things from Mod Monitor, confidence, looking at RDS. You can't beat a software defined radio. And that was something that you said you got one in the back of your rack too.
Oh yeah, I've got it plugged in, and it makes for a great tool to decode RDS and see who's doing what mod wise. And it, I will say though, the reception, its reception for a $30 USB dongle, I'm not complaining, but it still quite doesn't live up to my Sony HD radio tuner that I also have here in my rack. That's it's great for the price point, but it's still not quite as good as some purpose-built radios.
Right. And Brian is asking what SDR software you recommend. And when I know we talked a lot about RTL SDR earlier, or RDL SDR, sorry. So what do you prefer?
AirSpray or AirSpray, depending on how you pronounce it. I really enjoy it. That has a great user interface for me. I mostly use, because of what I listen to on FM, I mostly use the NRSC5 GUI. Because a lot of the stations I listen to, I'm blessed to live here in Pittsburgh where we have a lot of HD2 and 3 subchannels. So I usually will have that potted up here on in the office while I'm working. And that's usually what I stick with for the SDR.
So AirSpray, it would be AIRSPRY, have I guessed that right?
Yes.
Yay. So this is what happens when you leave me in charge for a little while. Now,
AirSpy, AIRSPY, sorry, AIRSPY, AirSpy.
So there we go. Yeah, I threw the R in there and you never even caught it. Look at that. So AIRSPY, Google will probably get you there pretty quickly. Now, you had mentioned the Sony receiver, and you also have this little guy, the Sangean, in your toolkit.
I love this. I love the Sangean HD radios for a couple of reasons. Number one, they will decode full MA3 HD on AM. They will do the hybrid and the full digital. They do full digital FM, and they are very sensitive and selective receivers. Period. But this guy has great battery life, runs on a couple AA batteries. I carry this with me wherever I go on the road. because whenever we're setting up automation systems, I want to make sure that the RDS is correct. I want to make sure I've got all that set up. And it, if when I'm doing my side contract work, it's also a great tool I use. It's the DAC in it is very neutral, so it doesn't color the audio. So I set processing with this, and again, it fits in your pocket. It has a nice display that you can scroll through all the various info from RDS and pad, and gets great reception.
Very cool. And I mean, it's yeah, you can tell from the picture, it's not very big, and you're well under $100 with it. So that is cool. I may end up adding that to my list. Um, and I did block out the postal code up top. Sorry about that, folks. But I guess it probably doesn't matter, except when you find the tiny little town that I live in, then you probably could just send it to Jeff at whatever, and it'll get here. Now, one of the other things, and this is another example, nanny cam. You can get point tilt zoom nanny cams for well under $100 now, and they will work just great. Now, this is one of the things, especially if you've got an older, not web-enabled transmitter, that a lot of people don't think at. But if your remote control dies and you've got IP link, whether it's over a Max Connect or a direct cable or a Ubiquiti Wi-Fi bridge, you can get this in and you can read the meters on the front of your transmitter if you've got it positioned in the right place. So over and above security camera, again, using the pan and tilt, you can go in and take your meter readings with a dead remote control. So because technically, what's the FCC requirement? Once you lose control, you've got to shut it down in X number of minutes. And I don't think that's changed any, but at the very least, you can at least have some confidence that the thing is still functioning while you're on the way to the site or whatever. Yeah. Let's see. Mark Forrest mentions put in a nightlight at your site with cams so that you can see the colored lights. Well, there you go. There is that too. Now that does bring me to another topic, though. A lot of these cameras do really good night vision. I mean, I know I've got the Wise cameras around here, and day to night, it doesn't really matter, except you go color black and white, basically. But for security purpose, you're again well under 100. They're mostly rated indoors, but most transmission equipment is also rated indoors. So, and I know Alex has proven in the past that you can run a transmitter site with the door open and the snow piling at the front of the transmitter, and the Wise camera will still function.
Alex seems to always find the very, very fringe cases of how things will work.
It's a running joke. It's like whatever spec we put, he looks at it and says, "Hold my beer." So now, and Mark's asking, can I see the difference between a green light and a red light, though? And at nighttime, probably not. So yeah, definitely having a night light is a good idea so the thing stays in day mode. So yeah, that is a good point.
Mean, one of my favorite things now is that you can pick up very inexpensive strip lighting, LED strip lighting from almost any hardware store or Amazon. So if you want something that draws very little juice but will put out a good amount of light, they're I think $15 for a 6 or 8 foot strip of those multicolored lights, and just put some mood lighting out at the transmitter site.
Yeah. Well, and you can go a step further if you're accessing something like this. Amazon has got, and we talked about this a little while ago, and William mentions the exact same thing right here. Great minds think alike. But you can pick up the IP addressable extension power bars. So you could plug your light in, leave it physically turned on all the time, and then just turn on the power to the wall wart for it whenever you actually need to access the light.
So one of the things that I bought for here at the house is I bought Wi-Fi controllable light bulbs, and they're great because they come on. I have them on a schedule, so they come on at dusk, turn off at dawn, and they're great for that. But they could also be color controlled as well.
Ooh.
Those are
So,
those are very handy to pick up because while I love decorating for the holidays, I'm also lazy. So if I can make something look festive by just hitting a few buttons on the phone and changing them to red and green, makes life a lot easier.
cool. Now, Barry Michigan mentions, and for anybody who doesn't already tune into Barry's Thursday webinar, he'll get a shout out for that in a little bit too, oldradio.com. But Barry mentions that he's just resurrected a program he wrote in '89 and gave away, and does provide a link for it on the oldradio.com website. I don't know whether it's publicly accessible or whether it's on request, but that brings me back to stuff like, does anybody remember the old Continental E-Slide program that Steve Schott had written? That you started out as DOS and then they updated it to Windows. RF Specialties Group had a set of software that you could use for calculating antenna gain, line loss, SWR calculations, a whole bunch of things. So those are the other sort of things, and I'm not sure. I haven't looked recently. I may or may not have a copy of the RF Specialties software in my one of my hard drives, but I don't know if it's shown on their new website or not. Those are the kind of tools too that we really need to resource. Alan Fowler still mentions that he uses uh, having a brain fart here. E-Slide. Oh, there we go. Bob Groom's site. So Bob Groom, another great guy that's gone already. Is he's got, I think it's bobgroom.us, GROOM. I want to say there's an E on the end of that, but that one, he had calculator programs on there as well. Barry mentions that some of the RFS stuff, the radio, the English used to be my first language. Some of the RF specialties tools don't work with later versions of Windows. So definitely you do, again, caveat emptor, but there are a lot of good old tools out there. Speaking of good old tools,
The universal access key.
so a little while ago, you heard a little, well, you may have heard a little clunk. This USB microphone is really good at rejecting the background noise. But this is my site access kit right here. And it's for when all else has failed. Getting pulled over with those two things in your toolbox is probably a recipe for a little explanation. You know, what was that? Lucy, you got some splaining to do. Uh, so yeah, that's the kind of thing that you need on occasion, especially if you've got the lock. What do you
The
call
daisy
it?
chain locks.
The daisy chain locks, where somebody will eventually always bypass. And you either use this or a battery powered angle grinder, and I didn't bother bringing that up, but yeah, so what are the kind of things from a hand tool, or in this case, power tool? What are the tools that you think that you just don't leave home without? I mean, for me, it's a combination. Like I've got two full sets of combination wrenches, one metric and one SAE. So what do you use? I see Mark's got cordless drill in here.
I always carry a cordless drill with me, the charger for the cordless drill, because I never remember when the last time I charged the battery was. I always carry with me a miniature screwdriver set because I never know if there's going to be a greenie at the site or if I put it in my pocket the last time I walked out the door.
Yeah.
I always carry with me a Max Connect because I want to make sure that I have access at the site to the internet to get whatever I need.
Hmm.
Some random patch cables and some Studio Hub adapters. But the other thing that I always carry with me is I always have off Deep Woods bug spray in the truck.
Good. Now I use Muscal, but yeah. By the way, folks, we're at 2 o'clock. If anybody has to go, I understand this is archived. We're probably going to be a couple more minutes yet. So, because this is the part where we have some fun and talk about what is absolutely required. Let's see. So yeah, the bug spray, especially around this neck of the woods, is huge. Wally Lennox makes a good point here. Screw holding screwdriver. Especially if I'm working on a circuit board, and I just inherited a set of these from Dad's workshop when Mom downsized to move to an apartment. But I've got a full set of Phillips and flat blade screwdrivers now with the little holding retainer clips. And yeah, especially if you got to get into something that's a little hard to access. I mean, I've got fumbly fingers, and being able to do that. The other option is you take a little bit of electrical tape and hold the screw to the screwdriver that way, but it's not nearly as elegant.
My pap used to use a little bit of a paper towel to hold bolts in the socket or on the
Hmm.
wrench when putting them in there. That was our family trick.
Yep. Yep. No, anything like that that adds a little bit of friction is a really good idea. Mark mentions having a spare router, and yeah, more and more that is something that is relatively inexpensive and easy to have. Sean mentions a mobile phone charger, and that is huge. I mean, I carry a Mophie power brick with me everywhere I go because it's not just charging the phone. I mean, these headphones, my smaller earbuds, this FLIR camera, all this stuff charges USB. That
Or
you don't.
I got dinged the other week because since we have so many vehicles, and this sounds very, very, very selfish. We have so many vehicles that I can never keep track of what cords and what charger bricks and ports are in what vehicle. So I hopped in the truck the other day, and I realized that when my battery was at 30%, because it's also the GPS, that
Mhm.
I need to get a charge cable. So I had to go to a truck stop and overpay for a charge cable just to make sure that I had, juice on the phone, so that way I could use, because the phone is another multi-tool. It's your flashlight, it's your GPS, it's
Camera, yeah,
camera, it's everything.
yeah.
But yeah, always make sure you have plenty of those cables in the car or truck.
Yeah, and one more trip or tip to that one. I've started going to Amazon for the 4-pack of armored cables. So these are the ones that, my cats can't gnaw through, as an example. Not that that's ever happened before. But the other advantage to those, if they're on the ground and you step on it, they're a little heavier duty. And they tend to be, you can get them in various lengths. Mine are all 10 feet long, just because that way I'm not tethered to wherever I happen to have the charger if I'm plugged into a wall. Duncan mentions a right angle magnetic base, wide angle beam, I'm assuming work light. And if you put some gaff tape over the base so it's non-marring, it doesn't scratch stuff up. And that's another good point. And I've got somewhere around here, might be upstairs now, but a work light that I got from, I think, probably Shively, one of their giveaway products. I'm one of these people. I collect swag and bring it home and use most of it. But it's a running joke, everything I own has either got an Autel logo or a radio station logo on it. But the work lights, the other thing to remember with those, and something to pay attention to, is that a lot of gear these days is aluminum. And so you do have to find something that it'll stick to. And one of the things that I've used, my Wise cams come with a little mag mount, and they come with a little metal disc with double-sided tape. And so if I've got a piece of gear where I need a work light on a regular basis, I may just double-sided tape that little metal washer on there, so I've got my place to stick stuff. So yeah, cool idea there. Thanks, Duncan. He's got a reference to armytech.com, and that's tech TEK. They've got flashlights, and they do have some really high-powered stuff. They've got some great, what I call deer jacking lights, but just super bright LED lights. Um, oh, there you go. Curtis says Deep Woods Off is also good for clearing yellowed headlights. Now, I always thought toothpaste was the thing for that, but definitely that's good. Sean mentions Wasp Spray. If anybody's ever had
Yes.
to unplug an LMB, for example, on a satellite dish, or when you get to the site and discover the nest right in the corner of the doorway. Uh, so, yep, that's a good one. Toilet paper, yeah.
The other thing that's very handy for me, because I seem to always get my vehicle stuck, is I have a AAA membership with the free towing, because I managed to get my Suburban stuck at an AM site and needed to be hauled out.
Yeah.
It's
And
always
when you can bury a Suburban, it's not something that you're just going to winch out to a fence post or something. Let's see, magnet. Yep. So nut stays put or nut stays put or bolt stays put. Mark mentions multi-tool. That's also a good example. Duct seal for holding screws to screwdrivers, also good. And small tables, that's a good one there, Curtis. Do you remember, and this is another thing that Kevin had mentioned in the advanced questions, that now that Radio Shack isn't as ubiquitous as it used to be, do you have a go-to brick or mortar or online store for component level parts? And I mean, for me, DigiKey. What about you?
honestly DigiKey, Amazon. And on the East Coast, further a little east from here, there's a Micro Center in Philadelphia, and there's one on
Mhm.
Long Island that I frequent whenever I make my travels out that way, because there's always parts and things there. Believe it or not, there's an Office Max that is closing here in the North Hills of Pittsburgh. I picked up a USB to serial cable for $20 on
Nice.
closeout, because a lot of our devices still use serial, but a lot of computers serial, what's that? Why? So if that's another thing that you probably should have it handy, is if you've got that old RDS encoder that has to be reprogrammed, doesn't have a NIC on it, has a serial cable,
Yep.
throw Tele on your laptop, plug that USB to serial in, and you can still reprogram it. That saved my rear on a couple occasions, many times.
Yeah, and I mean that's one of those things, even going back to some of our transmitters, if you've got to load software in certain components over and above the usual user interface, if you've got to get deep down surgery, some of that is still done over a serial connection. And yeah, I mean my laptop is an example. I've been at a serial connection on a laptop for probably about 3 laptops now. Um, let's see, Ray mentions keeping a cheap Harbor Freight toolkit. That's almost what's a redundancy there, but in all of the vehicles. And yes, this. If you are somebody who lives and dies by the tools you have, you need more than one toolkit. I mean, for me, I've got a set of tools out in my carport for working on the vehicles and out around the yard. There's a set in my workshop, and there's another set in the back of the truck. So, and they all may be slightly different, like the power tools are all in the workshop, et cetera, and so on. The air tools are out in the carport. But yeah, it's better to have the tools in every place you'll need them than to assume that they'll be there. You ever get to, it's like you were saying, you get to a site and the little, the greenie walked away with you last time.
The other thing is, I drove to the site and I went, "Where's my radio? Where's my radio?"
Hmm.
I forgot the radio because I moved it from one vehicle to the other. The other reason to keep a toolbox in your truck or your vehicle is it makes for a great chalk. My wife and I were out driving, and we went to put the Suburban in park, and the actual cable popped off the transmission.
Yeah.
So because I heard the lever just went completely, was gone. So
Hmm.
I stood on the brake. I had her go back, open the hatch, and just put the toolbox in the back of the tire. Gently let off the brake, and it held there until my brother-in-law could come and fix it, because he's much more mechanically inclined than I am. He's also thinner, so he could fit under the truck to fix it.
Yeah. And that does make a difference sometimes. So one of the other things Tim Barry mentions is business band or GMS FRS two-way radios, or if you're a ham, take your ham radio to call for help if you've got no cell service. And that is another one of those critical things, is having some means of communication and knowing when you get to the site whether there's going to be cell service there, because a lot of them, not so much. Uh, let's see, John Van Milligan mentioned stack of old folding chairs, having a few at each transmitter site. Definitely a good idea to be able to sit down. Mark's naked without his greenie. That's almost a fashion comment. We won't get into that, but no, you're right, Mark. I mean, the greenie is an incredibly important tool. Um, let's see. Problem most things at the site and the tool sets they give out are standard, and yeah, that's a good point. Like I said earlier, you need to have metric and SAE wrenches. All right. I mean, I know we could keep going on this for hours, and we're already 10 minutes over the top of the hour. So, like I said, all these links I will compile them over the next little while. The next Waves newsletter will be a little bit yet, but when it comes out, you can expect to see them there. What I may do is when this goes up on YouTube is throw the list of links up in the comments section for the YouTube video too, just to make it worthwhile. Um, all means, online information. This webinar, as with all Nautel webinars, is recorded and archived for posterity, and just so I can look back and see how badly I embarrassed myself. I'm not sure why that's a benefit, but that's what they tell me. You know, as I mentioned several times, we got the Waves newsletter. We do have the YouTube channel. The cool thing, the YouTube channel, the support folks do a lot of how-to, like the things they get a lot of calls on, you know, how do you delete a preset, or how do you do this or that or the other thing. There'll be short little couple-minute long videos on there, how-to videos for that sort of thing. And then lots of online information. We'd mentioned Barry's BDR.net earlier and old radio. One other thing that Barry did put the tool suite that he was talking about earlier on oldradio.com/test/covpred.htm. Matt, I'm going to get you to scroll up to 2:08 p.m. where Barry put the link, and put that into chat if you could. One other note, and Tom and I were talking about this earlier. No, it wasn't Tom, sorry, that was a customer call, but somebody else who pays my bills. We got talking about audio over IP, and Barry does do his weekly Thursday session at it's 3 p.m. here, 2 p.m. Eastern. Work your time zone appropriately, but got Chris Crump from Comrex talking about WebRTC this week. So that's definitely cool. And again, like I said, I'm an RF guy, so this audio stuff is still all Greek to me, but definitely pay attention to that. On that note, Mr. Tom Lawler, I want to thank you very much for giving up a good chunk of your day for me today.
I'm very welcome. I enjoyed this. I do want to mention one thing though. You asked about using something in a way that it wasn't intended to be used, and I have something for you.
I knew there'd be something.
The Omnia 9XE software processor.
Yeah.
If you use NF remote to listen to the audio, I've actually, at a time where one of the STLs went down, I used NF remote as the STL over a LTE connection until I could get the regular STL back up and running.
Yeah.
I just made sure to click pre-processed audio, and that would make it makes for a great emergency STL in case you're ever in a pinch.
That's a cool idea. And that comes back to, like you were talking earlier, carrying a Max Connect with you, just so you've got an LTE link if all else fails. So on that note, folks, we're almost quarter after the top of the hour, a little longer than usual, but this is a topic, like I said, we could go on for hours. So I do want to thank you all for tuning in today, and hopefully we'll see you again really soon. Remember, next week, 50th anniversary. Don't know exactly what we'll talk about. Well, we're going to do tips, tricks, and we'll have a few surprise guests. So we'll have some fun. Thanks much. See you next time.